Parties meant to mark happy occasions sometimes end in unthinkable tragedy. These are the stories of parties that turned into scenes of horror, where joy gave way to chaos, and lives full of promise were cut short in moments that left families, friends, and entire communities struggling to understand how laughter turned into tears. In April 2014, what began as a night of laughter and music to mark the end of a university term in Calgary, Canada, turned into one of the most horrifying tragedies the city had ever seen. 5 promising young adults gathered with friends at a quiet suburban house in Brentwood, unaware that their lives would end in a way too brutal to comprehend. It was meant to be a carefree celebration, but before dawn it would be remembered as the worst mass killing in Calgary's history. Students from the University of Calgary held the gathering on Butler Crescent to celebrate Bermuda Shorts Day, a campus tradition marking the close of classes. Among the guests were Lawrence Hong, 27, a dedicated urban studies student; Joshua Hunter, 23, a drummer known for his kindness; Caitlin Paris, 23, a talented dancer and artist; Jordan Segura, 22, a religious studies student admired for his generosity; and 21-year-old musician and art student Zachariah Rathwell. None of them could have anticipated that one of the guests, Matthew DeGrude, a 22-year-old university student and Safeway employee, was descending into a state of psychotic delusion that would shatter all their dreams within minutes. DeGrude was the son of a respected Calgary police inspector and had recently been accepted into law school. Friends and colleagues had begun noticing his disturbing behavior in the weeks before the party. His social media posts had taken a strange turn. Messages about good and evil, reincarnation, and the apocalypse filled his page. He called U.S. President Obama the Antichrist and wrote that he was the good Darth Vader. Hours before the party, he posted the title of a Megadeth song, Dread and the Fugitive Mind, and carried garlic in his pocket to keep zombies away. To his friends, these remarks were bizarre but harmless. They were wrong. On the night of April 14th, DeGrude finished his shift at Safeway and joined the party at 11 Butler Crescent. His childhood friend Brendan McCabe had invited him, unaware of how unstable he had become. From the moment he arrived, Matthew's behavior alarmed others. He talked about jihad, the coming apocalypse, and claimed that midnight would mark the end of the world. At one point, he threw his phone into a fire and smashed it with an axe, insisting it was part of a divine plan. As the evening wore on, some guests went out for food, leaving DeGrude behind with others in the house. Just after 1 a.m., he armed himself with a large kitchen knife, put on blue latex gloves, and began attacking those nearby. Zachariah Rathwell was the first victim of the attack, followed by Joshua Hunter, Lawrence Hong, and Jordan Segura, all seated on a couch. Caitlin Paris tried to escape but was caught and fatally wounded. When friends returned minutes later, they found Joshua bleeding on the front lawn, barely able to speak before he died. Inside, police later discovered pools of blood and motionless bodies, describing the scene as pure carnage. DeGrude fled the house shouting, "It's the night of the long knives," before being tracked down by a police dog and arrested. Officers reported that he appeared calm, detached, and insensitive to pain, with garlic hidden in his sock. The victims' deaths devastated Calgary. Vigils and funerals filled the following weeks, uniting thousands in mourning. The University of Calgary granted posthumous degrees and established scholarships in their memory. Their families, determined to preserve their legacies, organized community events that encouraged 5 little acts of love to honor the 5 young victims. DeGrude underwent a psychiatric evaluation. Experts confirmed he had been suffering from untreated schizophrenia and had believed he was killing werewolves and medusas under the control of the Son of God. He was found mentally fit to stand trial but later declared not criminally responsible due to mental illness. The court ruled that he would remain in a secure psychiatric facility, subject to periodic reviews. Years later, his case still stirs deep emotions in Calgary. In 2019, DeGrude was granted unsupervised outings, sparking outrage from families who feared his release. In 2023, the Alberta Criminal Code Review Board again denied his request for discharge, citing continued risk to public safety. The tragedy remains haunting. It robbed a city of 5 bright young lives in what remains one of the most disturbing party deaths ever recorded. On February 28, 2020, Moscow-based blogger Ekaterina Didenko gathered friends and family to mark her 29th birthday at a private pool and sauna complex. Known to her more than 1 million followers for her cheerful videos about home medicine and family life, Ekaterina had built a successful online career as a pharmacist-turned-influencer. The event was meant to be a joyful milestone, but within minutes, it would descend into chaos and tragedy. Ekaterina's husband, 32-year-old IT specialist Valentin Didenko, had planned a surprise intended to make the evening unforgettable. To impress guests, he purchased around 25 kilograms of dry ice, frozen carbon dioxide, to pour into the pool and create a spectacular fog effect as partygoers jumped into the water. The idea seemed harmless, a theatrical gesture to entertain their friends, including 25-year-olds Natalia Monakova and Yuri Alfarov. But neither Valentin nor anyone else at the party realized that in an enclosed space, dry ice can be deadly. When exposed to water, it rapidly sublimates, releasing heavy carbon dioxide gas that displaces oxygen and makes the air impossible to breathe. As the guests gathered around the pool, Valentin emptied the massive container of dry ice into the water. In an instant, thick white vapor rose and spread across the room. Moments earlier, guests had been laughing, clinking glasses, and taking photos. Suddenly, people began coughing, gasping, and collapsing. Those closest to the pool, including Valentin, Natalia, and Yuri, lost consciousness almost immediately. Witnesses later described how they appeared to faint, unaware that the cloud engulfing them was filled with suffocating gas. Partygoers rushed to pull them from the pool, but several rescuers also began struggling to breathe. Panic erupted as the spa filled with choking fumes. Emergency services were called and ambulances arrived within minutes, but for 3 of the guests, it was already too late. Natalia and Yuri were pronounced dead at the scene from carbon dioxide poisoning and mechanical asphyxia, while Valentin was taken to the hospital but could not be revived. Several others suffered severe chemical burns and acute carbon dioxide poisoning, with 7 guests hospitalized and 2 remaining in critical condition for days afterward. Authorities confirmed that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the enclosed pool area had reached lethal levels, effectively cutting off oxygen and causing rapid asphyxiation. The Russian Investigative Committee opened a criminal case for causing death by negligence. Early reports confirmed that the victims had died from blocked airways and acute carbon dioxide exposure. Experts used the case to warn the public about the dangers of mishandling dry ice, especially in poorly ventilated spaces, emphasizing that even small quantities can create life-threatening conditions. In the days that followed, Ekaterina's grief played out publicly. From her hospital bed, unaware that her husband had died, she posted videos telling followers that she was alive, but had no news about him. Hours later, she confirmed that Valentin was gone. Through tears, she shared how their young daughter asked where her father was, unable to understand what had happened. The emotional footage spread rapidly online, but reactions soon turned bitter. Many accused Ekaterina of exploiting the tragedy for attention, while others defended her, saying she was processing her grief the only way she knew, through social media. The Moscow dry ice tragedy shows how easily a celebration can turn into a catastrophe when science is misunderstood. What was intended as a dazzling birthday surprise instead claimed 3 young lives and left multiple families shattered. Even years later, the haunting images of that night remain a warning about the lethal consequences of a simple mistake, one that transformed a moment of joy into one of the most harrowing party deaths ever recorded. It was supposed to be a weekend of joy, a celebration of love and friendship. But for 24-year-old Matas Kivlenieks, a promising goaltender for the Columbus Blue Jackets and one of Latvia's brightest young hockey stars, July 4, 2021, became a date forever associated with one of the most disturbing party deaths ever recorded. What began as a festive gathering in a Michigan backyard would end in shock, grief, and an outpouring of sorrow from the global hockey community. Matas Edmunds Kivlenieks was born in Riga, Latvia, on August 26, 1996. He grew up in a close family, raised by his mother and stepfather after his father's early passing. His love for hockey began at age 3 when he watched his cousin practice, and by 5 he had already taken his place in goal. His determination carried him from the Latvian Hockey Higher League to North America, where he joined the Cleveland Monsters in the American Hockey League before reaching the NHL with the Columbus Blue Jackets in 2019. Known for his humility, focus, and ever-present smile, Matas earned the respect of teammates and coaches alike. That summer, Matas decided to remain in the United States for the off-season, the first time he would experience Independence Day celebrations. On the weekend of July 4th, he and his friend, fellow Latvian goaltender Elvis Merzlikins, traveled to Novi, Michigan to attend a special celebration at the home of Blue Jackets goaltending coach Manny Lagasse. The occasion was doubly festive, not only the national holiday, but also the wedding of Lagasse's daughter Sabrina. The event carried a Hawaiian theme, with guests dressed in bright shirts, leis, and floral prints gathered around a pool and hot tub in the backyard. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere was relaxed and joyful. A display of fireworks was planned to close the night, but what was meant to be a harmless spectacle quickly turned deadly. A 9-shot mortar-style firework box was placed on a grassy area near the pool. After several rounds were fired successfully, the device tipped over, sending explosive shells shooting horizontally toward the guests. Matas was sitting in the hot tub when the fireworks began firing in the wrong direction. Witnesses said that as others scrambled for safety, he tried to move out of the way. One of the final shots struck him directly in the chest from a distance of about 10 feet. The powerful blast caused catastrophic internal injuries to his heart and lungs. Emergency responders were called at 10:13 p.m. Paramedics arrived quickly and transported Matas Mattis to Ascension Providence Hospital, but despite their efforts, he was pronounced dead shortly afterward. The Oakland County medical examiner ruled the death accidental. Authorities found no evidence of intoxication or negligence, and the firework used was determined to be legal in Michigan. The person who had set it up had followed the rules, but the device's unexpected tilt had tragic consequences. Tributes poured in from teammates, coaches, and fans. Columbus Blue Jackets president John Davidson called him an outstanding young man who greeted everyone every day with a smile, while former captain Nick Foligno described him as someone who didn't take one day for granted. The Latvian Ice Hockey Federation called his passing a great loss not only for Latvian hockey, but for the entire Latvian nation. At a memorial service held on July 15th in Upper Arlington, Ohio, Mertzlikin spoke through tears, revealing that Mattis had saved lives in his final moments, shielding Mertzlikin's pregnant wife and unborn child from the blast. "He saved my wife and my son," he said. "He died as a hero." In the months that followed, Mattis was honored across arenas. The Columbus Blue Jackets unveiled a banner bearing his name and number 80, which teammate Mertzlikins later adopted to keep his friend's memory alive. Fans created makeshift memorials outside stadiums, placing flowers, jerseys, and hockey sticks. His former junior team, the Sioux City Musketeers, retired his number 35 in tribute. The accident that claimed Mattis Kivleniek's life remains one of the most haunting in the sport's history. What was intended to be a joyful celebration turned into a devastating reminder of how fragile life can be. In the end, the young goaltender's legacy became more than his saves on the ice. It was his final, selfless act of courage, protecting others in the face of disaster. What began as a carefree company party turned within moments into an unforeseen tragedy. On July 21, 2022, an employee pool party in the quiet residential area of Karma Yosef, Israel, became the site of an unimaginable disaster. Dozens of guests had come to relax, eat, and cool off in the midday heat, unaware that beneath the shimmering water of the private swimming pool, the ground was unstable and seconds away from collapsing. 32-year-old Klil Kimi was among several co-workers attending the event organized by his marketing company. Described as a cheerful, athletic man with a passion for life, Klil had arrived expecting a day of fun with friends. The villa hosting the gathering was known locally for its lavish pool and frequent parties, but later reports revealed that the pool had been built without proper permits. The property owners, an Israeli couple, allegedly ignored regulations, and authorities would later confirm that had the correct application been filed, construction approval would have been denied due to existing infrastructure problems. It was shortly after 2 p.m. Around 50 people were at the villa, but only 6 were in the water when the unthinkable happened. Without warning, the floor of the pool gave way, and a violent sinkhole opened beneath the swimmers. Within seconds, water began spiraling downward, creating a vortex that dragged everything toward the gaping hole. Witnesses described how inflatables, pool toys, and even furniture were pulled into the rapidly draining pool as guests screamed and scrambled for safety. In that moment, Klil was swept into the sinkhole, disappearing almost instantly. A 34-year-old man beside him was also caught in the pool, but managed to grab the pool's edge and climb out with minor injuries to his head and limbs. Emergency services were immediately called, and within minutes, paramedics and Israeli fire and rescue services arrived on the scene. Paramedic Uri Damari later described the chaos: a crowd of terrified guests, an empty pool with a deep yawning pit at its base, and one man missing. The injured survivor was treated at the site and transported to the hospital, while specialized rescue teams began a race against time to locate Klil. The sinkhole extended more than 43 feet deep, forming unstable tunnels that risked collapsing further. To prevent a secondary cave-in, firefighters built a reinforced support structure before descending. Equipped with helmets fitted with GoPro cameras, they worked for 4 hours in treacherous conditions, carefully removing debris as water continued to seep through the fractured ground. Eventually, deep inside the tunnel, they found Klil's lifeless body. The cause of death could not be immediately determined, whether he drowned, was crushed, or died from the fall. But the tragedy left no doubt about the violent nature of the collapse. Police launched a full investigation into potential negligence, questioning the homeowners on suspicions of negligent manslaughter. The couple was placed under house arrest for 5 days, as authorities examined whether the illegal construction of the pool had directly led to the disaster. Investigators also dispatched a helicopter to survey the surrounding area for signs of additional sinkholes, fearing the instability could spread. Experts later explained that sinkholes of this nature form when underground material dissolves into groundwater, leaving a hollow cavity that eventually gives way under weight. In this case, the combination of unregulated construction and natural erosion proved fatal. In the aftermath, safety officials urged homeowners and builders to follow strict licensing protocols, warning that ignoring regulations could lead to further catastrophe. For those who witnessed it, the memory remains unbearable. The laughter that turned to screams, the pool that vanished in seconds, and the loss of a young man whose life ended in a chilling and unforeseen party disaster. At just 21 years old, Sadia D. Williams had her entire future laid out before her, a future built on strength, courage, and public service. She had proudly stood among her peers as a graduate of the D.C. Fire and EMS Academy's Cadet Class 27, smiling as she received her certificate and prepared to begin her first assignment with Engine Company 13 in the Southwest waterfront neighborhood. What was meant to be the start of a promising firefighting career would instead become the setting of a disturbing and heartbreaking party tragedy. Sadia had been admired by her instructors and classmates for her determination and discipline. Those who trained with her spoke of her resilience during the grueling physical sessions and her positivity in the face of exhaustion. Fellow cadet Ryan Pagel described how she never hesitated to challenge herself, often proving stronger than she believed. She had celebrated her graduation with pride, having successfully passed the National Registry Emergency Medical Technician exam, and looked forward to serving her community with the same passion that had carried her through the academy. On the night of Saturday, August 23, 2025, Sadia joined several classmates and friends for a private celebration in Northeast Washington, D.C. The gathering took place at a 4-story townhouse on the 700 block of 16th Street Northeast, where music and laughter filled the rooftop terrace. For the young firefighters, it was a chance to unwind after months of intense training. But shortly after 1 a.m., tragedy struck without warning. Witnesses reported that Sadia fell from the rooftop terrace, plummeting 4 stories to the ground below. The impact left her critically injured. Emergency responders rushed to the scene and transported her to a nearby hospital. But despite medical efforts, she was pronounced dead shortly afterward. Police later confirmed that no foul play was suspected, describing her death as a tragic accident, though the exact circumstances surrounding the fall remain under investigation. The rooftop where the fall occurred was reportedly enclosed by metal fencing, and investigators examined the structure to understand how such a devastating accident could have happened. Residents of the neighborhood described waking to the sound of commotion, followed by the arrival of emergency vehicles. One neighbor told local media she could not erase the image of the aftermath from her mind, calling the incident unimaginable. In an official statement, the D.C. Fire and EMS Department expressed its deep sorrow over the loss of a dedicated employee, a rising professional, and a bright presence within the organization. The tragedy shook the department to its core. Many of her peers had been with her just hours earlier, celebrating a future that had only just begun. To help her fellow cadets process the shock, the Firefighters Union deployed its peer support team to the training academy, ensuring emotional and psychological support for those most affected. Union President Dave Hoagland described the event as an incredibly tragic loss, emphasizing that the department was treating it with the same reverence and grief as an in-service death. Sadia would receive an honorary send-off, recognizing her dedication to a profession she had barely begun to serve. What should have been a night of triumph turned into an irreversible tragedy that stunned the entire city. Sadia D. Williams' passing was not only a devastating loss for her family, classmates, and department, but also a stark reminder of how fragile celebration can be when joy turns in an instant into heartbreak.